The figure was illogical. I blinked, rubbing my eyes as if the screen of my laptop were a dusty, ancient window that I could easily clean. However, the number persisted, unyielding and stark. In the antiseptic font of my online banking portal, negative $42,317.89. 17.89. My mind was unable to comprehend the information for a brief period. It was akin to witnessing a dog walk on its hind legs or the sky turn green. It was a violation of the natural order of things, particularly the scrupulously organized world of my finances. I am a financial analyst. Spreadsheets are my lifeblood. My credit score is considered a sacred text. I ensure that my checkbook is balanced to the nearest cent. A negative balance of this magnitude was not merely error, it was an event of extinction. My heart initiated a clumsy, frantic drum solo against my ribcage. My mouse hand was damp with a sudden, cold perspiration as I scrolled through the transaction history. And there it was. Not one, but two devastating blows. A $14 $8.99 debit from Precision Power Sports. In addition, there is a 2027 4018.89 charge from Suburban Auto Group immediately beneath it. Yesterday, both were processed. Both on the emergency credit card I had, which was linked to my checking account for overdraft protection. The one that my parents were authorized users of strictly for emergencies. I was certain of the events that had transpired, and the sensation was akin to ice water coursing through my bloodstream. My father had been joking about the motorcycle for months. The old sedan that my mother insisted was too embarrassing to drive any longer was replaced by a new model SUV. They had accomplished it. They had indeed accomplished it. This was not the initial tremor, by any means. Their presence in my life had been characterized by a series of seismic shifts, which required me to constantly seek stable footing. It began in a subtle manner, as these things always do. My father was terminated from his position at the factory when I was 16 years old. Although the entire establishment was closed, it was not his responsibility. However, his pride was permanently damaged. Rather than securing new employment, he discovered poker evenings. He was not a villain, at least not in the manner that is depicted in films. He simply developed a state of weakness. He would return home with a pungent odor of cheap beer and desperation, and his pockets would be lighter than they were when he left. That was the moment I secured my first employment, bussing tables at a diner that was perpetually reeking of stale grease and burnt coffee. My paychecks, which were intended for college savings, began to disappear into the abyss of household expenses. My mother was a distinct form of tempest. She maintained her beauty as she matured, and she wielded it as a weapon. She was able to persuade a collections agent to extend her credit card payment by 1 month and beguile the late fees off a credit card bill. However, her charisma was a limited resource, and I was obligated to compensate for its depletion. Maria, my dear, would you be able to locate me a few hundred meters away? The electric bill is simply, you know how it is. Her voice was always a performance resembling that of a delicate, injured bird. How could I refuse? Throughout my tenure at Ohio State, I maintained a full course load while simultaneously working 3 part-time jobs. I graduated with honors, a mountain of student debt that was entirely my responsibility, and a job offer that felt like a lifeline. I relocated to a modest 1-bedroom apartment in an improved neighborhood and believed that I could finally breathe. However, you are unable to evade the gravitational pull of your family. I received the calls shortly after my initial significant promotion. Maria, the bank is making noises about the house. It was discovered that they had taken out a second mortgage years ago, a fact they had conveniently neglected to mention. It had been consumed by my father's wagering. The bank was currently threatening foreclosure. I was 25 years old and had just begun to establish my own existence. Suddenly, I found myself in a cold, impersonal bank office, co-signing their mortgage. My hard-earned financial security, my pristine credit history, is now ensnared by their sinking vessel. The loan officer's expression was one of sympathy toward me. Ms. Mitchell, are you certain about this? he had inquired. My larynx was constricted as I nodded, and I could feel my mother's hand exerting an excessive amount of pressure on my shoulder. My mother's voice was brimming with false pride as she declared, "She is our rock." Afterward, it was my brother, Leo. He was a specter in our family, flitting from one half-baked idea to another. His most recent endeavor was a landscaping enterprise that was operated with a rusted lawnmower and his decrepit Ford F-150. He refrained from contacting a mechanic when the transmission of the vehicle malfunctioned. He contacted me and stated, "I am unable to function without it, Maria. I will lose everything." Consequently, I paid the $3,000 repair bill. He assured me that he would reimburse me. He never did. Each time it was an emergency. Each time I was the only one who could help. Each time a portion of my future was eroded to repair the ever-widening cracks in their present. I had become their system, their procedure, and their walking, talking line of credit. Additionally, I had permitted them. Because, in my heart, I still believed that love was characterized by sacrifice. I believed that if I provided, repaired, and paid enough, they would eventually recognize me for who I am, rather than solely for what I could do for them. I ultimately comprehended the situation as I gazed at the negative amount of $42,037.89 on my screen. They would never be able to observe me. They were unable to. They did not regard me as a human being. I served as an asset, a seemingly infinite, deep well that they could access whenever they were parched. Additionally, they had recently exhausted it. I dialed my mother's number with a steady finger, despite the fact that my palms were trembling. Her voice was excessively cheerful as she detected the second chime. "Maria, I was just contemplating you, my dear. I and your father were just discussing the automobile." "Mother," I interrupted her. My voice was devoid of the emotion that was rumbling in my abdomen, and it was flat, and the motorcycle. A moment of silence ensued. A silence that is not confused, but rather one that is captured in the act. She exclaimed, her voice losing its lilt. "Oh, that way intended to inform you. It was unexpected, a pleasant surprise. It is not a surprise, Mother, that a $42,000 surprise has utterly destroyed my bank account. It constitutes larceny." My father's voice was audible in the background, emitting a subdued grumble. "Theft. Maria, refrain from being overly dramatic. It is familial." My mother returned to the phone, her demeanor transitioning from bewildered to irate. "I must admit, Maria, that you would expect us to be pleased with ourselves after all that we have done for you. You were nurtured by us. We constructed a roof over your cranium. You have a debt to us. I owe them." The words lingered in the air between us, thick and poisonous. After all those years of laboring, paying their expenses, and sacrificing my own aspirations to support theirs, they believed that I still had a debt to repay. It was almost comical due to the tremendous absurdity of the situation. A hysterical laugh began to bubble up in my bosom, but I was able to suppress it. "The roof that I am currently paying the mortgage on atop your head." My voice was eerily low as I inquired, "What is that roof?" "Please refrain from employing that tone when communicating with me," she retorted. "Maria, you are becoming increasingly self-centered. Since the moment you secured that high-profile position, do you believe that you are now superior to us?" I stated with an unsettling precision, "I believe I have reached my conclusion." "What has been completed? What is the subject of your conversation?" "I am organizing my birthday this year," I announced, my abrupt shift in subject matter evidently confusing her. "I will be 28 years old next month. I was contemplating visiting that new Italian restaurant in the city. The one with the rooftop veranda." A lull ensued. "Oh," she responded with a voice that was tinged with bewilderment. "Well, nice, dear." She then added, with a slight condescending laugh, "It's a bit expensive for a Tuesday, isn't it?" My birthday occurred on a Saturday. She was unaware of the day of the week on which my birthday occurred. For years, she had been unaware. The insignificance of that minor detail in the context of a 42,000 betrayal was the father that broke my back. It was the conclusive, irrefutable evidence. They did not merely withdraw my funds. They robbed me of my life, time, and identity without even bothering to acquire a fundamental understanding of my existence. My voice was lifeless as I replied, "Wes, perhaps it is?" I terminated the conversation. I refrained from slamming it down. I have just terminated the contact, thereby terminating the connection. The single tear that traced a hot path down my cheek was illuminated by the radiance of the screen as I sat in the silent apartment. The fury had vanished, and it was succeeded by a terrifying, liberating tranquility. Their belief was that I was their anchor. They were on the brink of discovering the consequences of the rock's decision to shift. I would be the one to initiate the avalanche, which was imminent. I awoke prior to my alarm the following morning. The apprehension persisted, a cold knot in my stomach. However, it was accompanied by a different emotion, resolve. I felt as though I had been asleep for a decade and had been abruptly roused from my slumber. The familiar ritual of brewing coffee served as a small anchor in the midst of the impending tempest. I sat at my laptop, not as Maria Mitchell, the dutiful daughter, but as Maria Mitchell, the financial analyst. I commenced the systematic dismantling of the existence I had established for my family. The residence was prioritized. I accessed the loan documents from that dreadful day at the bank. My name was located adjacent to theirs on the mortgage. I was a co-owner. However, for the previous 3 years, I was responsible for directly debating my account each month. I had the transaction history to substantiate my assertion. I contacted the mortgage department of the bank. Brenda, the woman on the other end, appeared to be disinterested until I provided her with the circumstances. "So, you are the primary payer on the loan, but you wish to cease payments?" she inquired, her voice tinged with curiosity. "I am no longer going to be subsidizing this loan, correct?" I stated, my professional demeanor settling into position. "I am interested in learning the process for starting a foreclosure as a result of non-payment by the other co-signers." A startled silence ensued. "You wish to foreclose on your own residence?" I wish to eliminate my financial obligations. My parents, the other proprietors, are unable to make the payments. I am writing to inform you that I will no longer be producing them as of today. You and they are responsible for the subsequent events." Brenda likely took a moment to peruse a manual of previously unheard of scenarios. "Indeed, madam, the loan would be in default. We would send notices, and if payment is not received, foreclosure proceedings would commence. It would have a substantial negative effect on the credit of all parties involved in the loan. I include you." "I am cognizant," I replied. "My credit has already been negatively impacted by $42,000. A minor increase in damage will be inconsequential at this juncture. Please accept this as my official notification." My heart was thumping as I hung up. It was completed. Their world had been appended by the removal of the first and foremost pillar. Subsequently, my sibling Leo's trailer. The title for that F-150 was registered in my name. I had insisted on it when I paid for his transmission, a rare instance of foresight. I had informed him that it was purely for security, and he had consented out of desperation. I discovered a local repossession company through an online search. The individual who responded sounded as though he had consumed gravel for breakfast. "Yes?" "Greetings, I am Maria Mitchell. I must coordinate for the repossession of a vehicle." I provided him with Leo's address and a detailed description of the truck. "Are you the one who holds the title?" "I am. I am currently in possession of the digital title." "All right, we will acquire it, most likely this evening. $200 for the assignment." "Done." I announce as I read off my personal credit card number, which my parents were not permitted to access. "Please provide me with a confirmations as soon as you receive it." But it was a surreal experience, as if I were rearranging pieces on a chessboard. Their castle, their queen, and their monarch, all were on the brink of being captured. Then, in order to safeguard what was left, I conducted a scorched earth policy on my own existence. I accessed the websites of the 3 primary credit bearers. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and initiated a credit hold. Without a PIN that was exclusively mine, it would be impossible for anyone to establish a new line of credit in my name. It was akin to altering the seals on my financial identity. The subsequent step involved the shared accounts, the family's cell phone plan, which I prepaid, canceled. Immediate effect. They would be required to obtain their own plans, which would necessitate a credit check that they would undoubtedly fail at this time. My entire extended family appeared to possess the passwords to my Netflix, Hulu, and HBO Max accounts. Then I changed the passwords to lengthy, intricate sequences of random letters and numbers after logging into each one and selecting sign out of all devices. The river of complimentary entertainment had dried up. The final, and potentially most severe, reduction was the gas bill. Years ago, my mother was involved in a dispute with the gas company, which resulted in a black mark on her record, rendering her ineligible to establish an account. Consequently, the gas bill for their residence has been in my name ever since. I was merely the payer. I did not reside there. I contacted the utility company. Hello, I am in the process of relocating and require the closure of my account at 123 Maple Street. Indeed, madam. Additionally, what is the date on which you plan to vacate the premises? Today, I replied. Oh my God. Okay, we can arrange for a technician to arrive and terminate the service tomorrow morning. I am grateful, I replied. That will be ideal. I was aware of the significance of this. Absence of heated water. There is no furnace. My mother would be unable to simply call and reactivate it. Not her name. A piece of malicious compliance in a conflict that had become anything but petty was a petty move. However, it appeared to be indispensable. It was a tangible representation of the boundary I was marking. The warmth they had previously taken for granted was being disconnected at the source. The adrenaline began to diminish as I pressed the final button and closed my laptop, and was replaced by a profound, terrifying silence. My residence, which is typically my sanctuary, appeared to be a bunker. The missiles had been launched by me. Presently, my sole option was to await the consequences. It was completed fairly rapidly. Around 6 p.m., my phone began to vibrate. My mother was the individual in question. I disregarded it. Again, it sounded like a buzzer. Disregarded. Afterward, a text message was displayed on the screen. Maria, what is the issue with your phone? You may contact me by phone. Several minutes later, an additional text was received. Have you updated your Netflix password? Your relatives are unable to cooperate. I observed the messages accumulate and a morbid curiosity developed. It was akin to viewing a documentary about an ecosystem that was disintegrating. The predators were recognizing that their sustenance source had disappeared. Leo's text followed shortly thereafter. The string consisted of a series of misspelled curses and furious emojis. Where is my truck? Subsequently, an individual has just touted away. They claimed that you contacted them. YTF Maria, please contact me immediately. The genuine Tempest arrived approximately 1 hour later. My father made the phone call. I permitted it to be directed to voicemail. The message he left was an enraged, rambling tirade. Maria, what is really happening? Yes, your mother is in tears. Is your brother's vehicle missing? The bank contacted me regarding the property. I am requesting that you contact us immediately. This is not the normal behavior of a daughter. This is offensive. In light of the numerous favors we have rendered to you, the hypocrisy was so dense that I could have choked on it. Then the doorbell chimed, a lengthy, insistent peal that reverberated throughout my tranquil apartment. I crept to the peephole. They were the ones. The faces of my mother, father, and Leo were contorted with fury as they crowded onto my small welcome mat. My mother repeatedly knocked on the door. Maria, I am aware that you are present. Please open this door immediately. It is imperative that we discuss this matter. My father's voice was audible. You are not permitted to remain concealed. Maria! You have created a disaster, and you intend to rectify it. I stood with my back against the wall adjacent to the door, my heart pounding. Every ounce of my being begged me to open it, to reconcile the situation, to absorb their rage, and to somehow ensure that everything was all right as I had always done. It was a role that was so deeply ingrained in me that I could sense the muscle memory attempting to take over. The deadbolt provoked a twitching sensation in my hand. However, I then considered the negative number on my bank statement. I recalled my mother's dismissive chuckle in reference to my birthday. I contemplated the decades I spent as their human eraser, rectifying all of their errors. I refrained from migrating. Standing motionless, I held my breath in a faint manner, anticipating their departure. For what seemed like an eternity, they yelled and banged, their voices a muffled cacophony of entitlement and wrath. Ultimately, they departed after my father delivered one final, ferocious blow. I remained by the door for an extended period, listening to the angry footfall that echoed down the hall. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, bringing my knees to my chest. I had maintained my position. However, I did not experience any sense of victory. There was nothing but an immense, void-filled fatigue. The subsequent phase of their assault was psychological. My mother employed social media platforms as a result of their inability to communicate directly with me. She composed a lengthy, convoluted paragraph on Facebook, meticulously arranged to portray her as a saintly, forbearing mother and me as a frigid, heartless monster. The text began with the phrase, "I am uncertain as to what we did to deserve this," which was accompanied by a soft focus photograph of her and my father from years ago. We provided our daughter with everything. We adored her and provided her with our unwavering support. However, she has now resolved to discard her family in favor of her success. She has caused her parents to become destitute and siphoned off her brother's income due to a minor financial dispute. We would appreciate your prayers for our family and for Maria to reestablish her connection to the light. I am heartbroken. Immediately, the comments began to pour in. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and old family acquaintances were all lining up to offer their sympathy and condemn me. I am incredulous, Linda. She was consistently a delightful young woman. This is the consequence of children forgetting their heritage. People are influenced by money. It is truly disheartening. Each comment was a sharp, minor sting. These were individuals who had observed my development, who had attended my high school graduation, and who had consumed the Thanksgiving dinners that I had assisted in preparing. Additionally, my mother had transformed them all against me with a single post that was expertly composed. She had obliterated my reality and replaced it with her own fictional narrative of victimhood. It functioned. I was largely isolated. The family group messaging, which was previously a continuous stream of benign updates and offensive memes, became silent for me. My phone, which had been erupting with their fury, was now ominously silent. I had been excommunicated. That was the moment I realized that I was unable to complete this task independently. The debt, the betrayal, and the slander campaign were all crushing me. I experienced a sensation of being submerged. I conducted a Google search for therapists near me on an impulse. I discovered a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, who was identified as a specialist in financial trauma and family dynamics. It seemed too flawless to be a coincidence. I scheduled an appointment for the subsequent week. The act of entering her office was akin to a resignation. The room was serene, with a gentle sage green-painted wall and comfortable chairs. A box of tissues was placed on the table between them, which appeared both comforting and ominous. Sharma was a woman in her 50s who was kind-faced and had intelligent eyes that appeared to see through the meticulously constructed wall of composure I had constructed around myself. Her voice was soothing as she began, "So, Maria, what has brought you to this location today?" For the first time, I revealed the entire narrative, not the refined version, but the unadulterated, repulsive reality. I discussed the diner and the paychecks, the mortgage, the vehicle, and the final, catastrophic $42 in charge. The dam I had constructed within me finally burst as I spoke. The heated and unstoppable tears that I had been suppressing for a decade began to fall. I shed tears for the 16-year-old girl who was prematurely required to mature. I wept for the 25-year-old who had tied her future to the past of her parents. I wept for the woman I was now, who was alone and under duress. Dr. Sharma listened attentively, urging the box of tissues to draw nearer. When I was finished, my voice was raspy and my visage was a mess. She did not provide platitudes or simple answers. Rather, she said something that would alter my perspective on everything. She spoke gently. Maria, you were not their daughter. You served as their purpose. You were appointed as the crisis manager for the family. You served as their ATM, emergency fund, and safety net. Additionally, they refrained from attempting to rectify the ATM when it was rendered inoperable. They immediately initiated the process of booting the machine. The words struck me with the impact of a physical blow, a function, not an individual. Although it was a severe clinical expression, it was the most accurate assessment of my relationship with my family that anyone had ever made. She continued, the affection for you is transactional. It was contingent upon your utility. You were cherished as long as you were contributing. At the instant you ceased, you were a disappointment and a traitor. We conversed for an hour, and with each word, it appeared as though a lifetime of uncertainty was being unraveled. She provided me with the terminology that aptly describes my experience of parentification, emotional manipulation, and financial maltreatment. I had never been a child in their household. I had been a small, unpaid employee. The guilt you are experiencing is not your own. Dr. Sharma informed me at the conclusion of our session. They installed it in you, similar to a piece of software, to guarantee your adherence. You are currently responsible for uninstalling it. I emerged from her office with a sense of vulnerability, yet also a sense of liberation. The narrative that my mother had fabricated on Facebook, in which I was the antagonist, had lost its influence. I was not a disobedient daughter. I am only now discovering the full extent of my injuries, despite the fact that I was a survivor. The genuine examination of my newly acquired resolve occurred 2 weeks later. It was the evening of Tuesday. I was conversing with a representative who was unexpectedly sympathetic while attempting to resolve the credit debt when an unknown number contacted me. I permitted it to be directed to voicemail. A message appeared 1 minute later. It was sent by my mother. The recording contained a voice that was entirely distinct from hers. The anger was supplanted by a strained, desperate panic. Maria, it is my mother, Ba. Kinley returned my message. Your father is the individual in question. He fell. Descend the stairs. He sustained a hip fracture and an injury to his limb. We are currently at the infirmary. They are asserting that he requires an emergency operation, meaning surgery. Maria, please, we are without insurance. I am uncertain as to what course of action to take. The hospital requires payment in advance. I implore you, dear. I am aware that we have encountered our fair share of challenges. However, this is your father. I listened to the message on 3 separate occasions. My palms became numb. The software that Dr. Sharma had previously discussed, the remorse program, commenced operation. He is your father. He is experiencing discomfort. You are required to provide assistance. This is a genuine emergency. Although my savings were significantly diminished, they were not wholly eradicated. Although my credit was severely damaged, it is feasible that I could obtain a high-interest personal loan. I am capable of rectifying this. I could enter and once again play the role of the savior, and perhaps, just maybe, this time they would be truly appreciative. This time it would be distinct. My phone was clenched in my hand like a grenade as I stood up and paced my small living room. I could sense the power of the old patterns pulling me back, the familiar, powerful tide of obligation. I recalled my father, who was lying in a hospital bed, writhing in agony and frightened. The thought was painful, despite all the circumstances. Nevertheless, Dr. Sharma's voice penetrated the cacophony that was my mind. Their purpose was fulfilled by you. Was this an additional crisis that the crisis manager was responsible for managing? He had not fallen as a result of my actions. Their lack of insurance was not my responsibility. I had been imploring them for years to enroll in a plan through the state exchange. My mother had consistently expressed her belief that the matter was excessively intricate. We will eventually address it. They had not yet completed it because they were not required to. They had a superior insurance policy, mine. My fingertips lingered over my mother's contact information. I have the option to call, to capitulate, or to set myself on fire once more in order to maintain their warmth. Alternatively, I could allow them to ultimately confront the repercussions of their own actions. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, albeit with tremors. I initiated the messaging application and composed a response. Each letter was a monumental endeavor, and my fingers felt heavy. I trust that he will make a full recovery very soon. However, I will not be sacrificing my own life in order to alleviate their suffering. Before I could reconsider my actions, I pressed the send button. Delivery of the message was accomplished. No response was received. The silence that ensued was the most resonant sound I had ever encountered. It was the sound of the concluding cord being severed. It was the sound of my liberation. The months that followed were characterized by a tranquil process of reconstruction. I worked extra hours, devoting every available dollar to the mountain of debt that my parents had left me. Slowly and with great care, the negative balance in my bank account began to decrease. A modest sacrifice that felt like a victory was made when I sold my car and began taking the bus to work. I relocated to a more modest, cost-effective apartment. Every decision was made by me for me. The foreclosure of my parents' residence was successfully completed. An aunt who had not been convinced by my mother's narrative contacted me to inform me that they had relocated to a small, dilapidated rental apartment located in a different part of town, which had been funded by a charitable organization. Leo had lost his business and was working part-time at a gas station, as he was without his vehicle. The family that had appeared to be so substantial and influential was ultimately exposed as a mere facade, and I had been the sole obstacle. The initial tangible indication of my new existence was a wedding invitation. Hannah, my cousin, was the source. She was the daughter of my mother's sibling, and she was a few years younger than me. Hannah had always been distinctive. She was the sole member of the family who inquired about my day, remembered my birthday without a Facebook notification, and regarded me as Maria rather than as a solution to a problem. Her silence during the Facebook drama was noticeable, and I interpreted it as a subdued expression of encouragement. I was apprehensive to attend the wedding. I was aware that they would be present. However, the prospect of being absent from Hannah's life was more distressing. So I purchased a new dress, a basic, elegant navy blue dress that evoked a sense of strength, and proceeded to the event. They were immediately visible to me upon entering the reception hall. I had never seen them look older or more worn down, and they were standing near the bar. My father was significantly reliant on a cane. My mother's visage, which was once so lively, was now marked with lines of bitterness. They observed me concurrently with my observation of them. The entire room appeared to be frozen for a brief period. My mother began to approach me, a recognizable storm cloud forming in her gaze. However, Hannah was nearby and connected her arm to mine before she could reach me. "Maria, you arrived," she stated with a smile that was both genuine and radiant. "You appear beautiful, but I would like you to meet my new in-laws. Please come." She successfully established a buffer, a human shield of civility, that effectively drove me away. I encountered my parents at the gift table later in the evening. This time, there was no way out. "So," my father replied, his voice a subdued rumble. "Observe yourself. Without a concern in the world. You are all dressed up while your family is in a state of disarray." I responded with a composed and steady tone. "My family is not in a state of disarray." It was a voice that I did not recognize, one that had been shaped by adversity and therapy. I am constructing a new one that is founded on the principle of respect. The laughter that my mother let out was brief and unattractive. Respect. Do you wish to discuss respect in light of the actions you have taken against us? Maria, we possess nothing. There is nothing. You were presented with a decision, I stated, gazing directly at her. You could have had a daughter who adored you and would have gone to great lengths to support you. Nevertheless, you opted for a new vehicle. You have made your decision. I also created mine. I did not anticipate a response. I simply turned and departed, leaving them to remain in the midst of the joyful pandemonium of the wedding. It was not a dramatic, movie-ending speech. It was the straightforward, unadulterated truth. However, the genuine turning point was not that confrontation. It was the subsequent event. I initiated my own initiative by applying my financial acumen, a talent that my family had effectively leveraged. I established a small consulting business as a side hustle where I assisted individuals my age in organizing their finances, getting out of debt, and planning for the future. I developed spreadsheets not to monitor my parents' expenses, but rather to visualize the aspirations of others. It commenced with a small number of consumers, which was followed by an additional few. Within a year, it achieved sufficient success to result in my resignation from my corporate position. In every respect, I was finally my own employer. On a tranquil Saturday, my 29th birthday transpired. I did not formulate any significant intentions. The concept of an Italian supper on a rooftop seemed to be a recollection from a previous existence. I spent the day hiking, alone with the gentle rustle of foliage and the firm ground beneath my feet. Upon my return to my apartment, I discovered a diminutive package on my entryway. A card and a miniature, flawless chocolate cake were enclosed. Hannah was the source. The card was read as I sat at my diminutive kitchen table. Maria, I wish you a very happy birthday. I am immensely pleased with the woman you have evolved into. I understand that this year has been the most challenging of your life, but I wanted to inform you of something I should have told you much earlier. You were never the issue. You were the initial individual to demonstrate the courage to flee. And as I sat there in my own apartment, which I had purchased with my own money, preparing to consume a cake that had been generously given to me by an individual who requested nothing in return, I finally broke down in tears once more. However, these were not the hot tears of wrath or the desperate tears of grief. They were subdued sobs of relief. The healing process was not a singular dramatic event. It was a gradual, inconspicuous process. It was the absence of a new crisis, as my phone did not ring. It was a delightful experience to purchase a new book without contemplating the allocation of funds to other worthy causes. It was the realization that the word no is not a curse word, but rather a protective shield. It was the realization that a family is not something one is born into, but rather something that is constructed. A foundation of mutual respect and trust rather than a pyramid of obligation with you at the base. At times, the process of recovery is characterized by a loud, explosive act of defiance. However, at times, it is simply the quiet, steadfast decision to remain silent when guilt, which is presented as affection, approaches. I had finally acquired the ability to ensure that the door was closed, secured, and bolted. I was unoccupied. I was entirely my own. Additionally, this was sufficient.